What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Karn, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, Tennessee has made a coaching hire, and Danny White went with a guy he was pretty familiar with in Josh Huepel.
Yeah, it seemed like it was just hiding in plain sight. We tried to talk about these guys that he's interviewed recently, like you mentioned, Tony Elliott. That was a great suggestion, only he ended up settling and hiring somebody. Maybe we should have started there. But nonetheless, Josh Heupel's been hired. By some, it's been, just the right move. By others, it's a bit underwhelming. What was your initial reaction, Jacob?
So I'll be honest. My initial reaction was probably similar to that of the Tennessee fan base. And that was after hearing names like PJ Fleck and James Franklin, to hire Josh Huepel after that seems a little underwhelming. So that was my initial thought, was underwhelming hire. And someone else pointed out something funny, which is for Josh Huepel, it's kind of awkward because he wasn't Danny White's first choice at UCF. And now he wasn't Danny White's first choice at Tennessee. And so he's just the guy that he keeps coming back to with, you know what, we're going to go with Ole Reliable. What was your initial reaction?
So I was actually on the other side. Right out of the gate, for the most part, I thought this is exactly what Tennessee needs. So, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Tennessee didn't need the home run hire right now. And I know that just might seem ridiculous. That might just seem like you always want to hire the best person, but also it's climate, it's where the program is. There's a certain amount of finesse that has to go into this job. And you and I have talked about it. And I think that you probably got to this point as well after you sat and thought about the hire the more you thought about it. But what does I think what Josh Huepel does well is coach an offense, and he develops quarterbacks. You look at what Dylan Gabriel has done the past couple of years, has been very impressive at UCF. If you look at the speed of offenses and how quickly they run, they have UCF had a faster offense than Ole Miss. Well, who gave Alabama the most trouble? It was Ole Miss this year. Ole Miss and Florida as far as offensively, both of those. And so I think that that's very important. And those are two things that Tennessee has been absent of. The third thing that I think can't go unmentioned is stabilizing the program. I do think that this is a little bit of a safe hire, and so you're kind of clipping your wings there at the top. But I think you've raised your floor in the sense that after this first year of probably developmental figuring things out, I think you're going to be at a point where you're not going to lose more than 4 or 5 games a year. And so I know that sounds like a very low bar to set, but you're basically setting yourself up for a bowl game every year, which means so much to a program going forward. You get the revenue from the bowl, the extra practices that then springboard you to the next year and will continue to help you develop and grow a team. I just think that someone to stabilize the program is more important than maybe that flashy name that has the chance to take them to high heights, because Tennessee's still kind of in that range where they're not the big dog and they might not be a destination program. What if a Hugh Freeze came here and coached them up, had a few really great years, and then took off for the next best thing after maybe a more established coach retires? So I think it's important to maybe stabilize your base, and then maybe Heupel can take them to that next step. And if they keep hitting their head on the ceiling, think maybe Mark Richt in Georgia hitting their head on the ceiling, 10 wins, 11 wins, nothing else. Maybe that's when you make the move and you can get to that place.
So Heupel, I thought about the safety thing, right? Kind of like you're talking about, safe hire. And I also think about stuff that Tennessee fans want to see, right? what did they struggle with under Pruitt? Well, an offensive style that, is in the 21st century. Number one. Number two, the development of a quarterback, which the last 3 years, that's been the two biggest problems with Tennessee. And like you mentioned, that's two things that UCF has done really well. Their offense, consistently has ranked in the top 10 yards per play, the adjusted speed metrics, and then quarterback. They've had Mackenzie Milton and Dylan Gabriel, who have been two of the best quarterbacks in the country. And so here's my other bone to pick with Heupel. You could argue that UCF has regressed every year since Scott Frost left, right? So Scott Frost goes 13-0 in 2017, wins the national championship against Auburn in the Peach Bowl. And, Scott Frost goes and takes the Nebraska job. The following year in 2018, UCF goes 12-1 in Josh Heupel's first year. In year two, 2019, they go 10-3. And then this past year in 2020, given this season was weird, but 6-4, right? So you could argue every year they have regressed under Josh Heupel. But if there's a coach that Danny White knows really well, it's Josh Heupel. He worked for him for 3 years. So I have to think that Danny White knows that and knows that, hey, maybe there was other stuff going on with the program. But, hey, it's a big hire that he said he wanted to make quickly. And so pulling the trigger on Josh Heupel, I'm inclined to believe he can do it because Danny White clearly believes that he can do it.
Yeah, I kind of draw a parallel with this one and Brian Harsin going to Auburn. Both of them were the successors of the best regime in a program's history. So both of Brian Harsin famously followed Chris Peterson at Boise State and basically kept the train rolling. Josh Heupel, in a similar sense, I know that you obviously were talking about him regressing a little bit, but takes over from Scott Frost, keeps the train going. I think there's something to be said about that. I think that Auburn and Tennessee are both kind of a new wave of thinking in the sense that they want to go get somebody who's not from the Saban tree and not just your run-of-the-mill SEC hire. They see the arms race that's going on with offenses and they want in. And then maybe not in the sense that Auburn, but more they're both just trying to get someone from outside the footprint to bring in new ideas and see if those ideas from that other area can make sense with SEC players. So let's try it out.
So Josh Heupel has already, it's not official yet, but some pretty good reports from the guys over at GoVols 24/7. The Heupel's bringing his entire offensive staff from UCF. So including Glenn Ealerby, the offensive line coach, Alex Golish, the tight ends coach, Cody Burns, the wide receivers coach, Joey Hazel, the quarterbacks coach, and Matt Merritt, the running backs coach. And Burns and Merritt have both been co-OC included in that. And so apparently he's bringing the entire staff with him. And UCS offense, again, that's been the strength of their team the last 4 years. And it's been the pitfall of Tennessee's team the last 4 years. So I think the Tennessee fans have that to be excited about, in that even if you go, let's talk worst case scenario for a second. If you go 3-9, if you go 4-12, it will be a much more exciting product at 3-9, at 4-12. If you start, excuse me, 3-9, 4-12, 4-8. Goodness, it'll be much.
They don't get to play any extra games if they're 4-win team.
No, but it can be a much more exciting product, and you have the ability to win this year. It's not like Tennessee is bare when it comes to talent. Like, you're still going to be more talented than Missouri, than South Carolina, than Vanderbilt, than Arkansas. Like, you're still going to be more talented than the teams you're playing, and you have the ability to win those games. And so I think if Heupel can come in year one show, I think in year one, especially with everything that's gone on this season, you just got to show some development at the quarterback in a different offensive scheme. I think that's your goal in year one, is just show the fans something to be excited about if you're Tennessee.
I agree. I think that's important, and we'll definitely see what the Volunteers have in store. You mentioned Cody Burns. He's a fast riser in the coaching ranks. He's a former quarterback turned receiver turned quarterback at Auburn. So definitely interested to see how he does as a coach. The fact that he's getting he's getting a shot with an SEC school. I have a feeling he's here to stay as far as the SEC goes. So he might get cycled around as he gets promotions and stuff like that, but definitely, definitely fun to watch. I'm glad that this kind of took place so quickly. And I like the point that you made last week or earlier this week. It seems like it's been last week, but that this is better. And you were referencing the athletic director hire and then the potential head coach hire, that it's better to go ahead and make those decisions than to just sit in your own misery. I really like the imagery you used there, because it really made it feel like that's really how I would see Tennessee, this year, if they just stuck with Kevin Steele as an interim and there's all these things swirling. Now, all you're going to be talking about is, what's this new offense look like? What is this? Is he developing a quarterback? Who's going to play quarterback? You're going to be talking about all these different things. And you might say, yeah, they've got sanctions, but hey, we want to figure this offense out. What's going on with this offense? So there's going to be competing narratives, competing plots, and you're not going to have one dominate the other. So, or at least not the bad one dominate the other. So long as it's not, like the death penalty or something that we saw at SMU in the 80s. So definitely excited to see where this goes.
So Burns, I'll just mention, the former Auburn quarterback, wide receiver. Although he was on UCF staff, he has spent the last 5 seasons on Auburn staff. He was just hired this offseason by Josh Huepel at UCF. He's developed players like Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, and he's been the primary recruiter for a lot of great players in that roster. And so you're bringing in an SEC caliber coach and an SEC caliber recruiter with that staff, which is huge, right? So 2 conferences have released schedules this week, and let's just hope and pray that 2021 brings us these schedules to be completed. And
Absolutely.
I think having completed a season this year, even if the circumstances aren't much better than they were this past season, I think you're going to see some agreement between the conferences to have similar guidelines so that we can make these out of conference schedules happen, right? Because that's what people look forward to. That's exciting. Daniel, I'll throw it to you. This is an easy question. The game we're most looking forward to that has been announced so far, it's very easy. It's Georgia and Clemson. It's week 1. That's going to be a top 3 matchup, most likely, between 2 top 3 teams. Clemson has been a perennial powerhouse. Georgia has been on the cusp. This game's in Charlotte. It is a historic rivalry that they haven't played all that often as of recent. These schools are 75 miles apart. It doesn't get much better than this unless it was on campus. That's the only thing that would make it better, right?
Right. If this was on campus and, you mentioned that they don't play very often, and that's absolutely true. Due to conference scheduling and different things like that, we definitely need this game more because it's very much a regional rival, classic rivalry. Well, if you want this rivalry, you're going to get it because in the next 10 years, they play 5 times. So the schools have worked it out to do some home and homes. This is the first one, and it's just going to be a kickoff game. I believe they have a Chick-fil-A kickoff at some point as well. And then they have 2 home and homes, something like that.
So they've got the Chick-fil-A kickoff game in 2024.
That's it. Okay.
And then you've got 2 home and home scheduled in 2028 and 2029, and then 2031 and 2032. It's these decade out schedules, whatever. But anyway,
you have to do it. That's the nature of the beast. That's why this year was so weird, where you're literally making a schedule weeks before it's played, or in the sense of BYU and Coastal Carolina, literally a couple days beforehand, just enough time for the equipment bus to make it across the nation for BYU to play that game. So Clemson UGA, that's going to be at the top of that list. you're going to talk about what Georgia is returning. You're going to talk about what Clemson potentially isn't returning on offense, and then vice versa on defense. Georgia losing some on the defensive side, Clemson literally returning everybody. So that's one we're going to really sink our teeth into. And then one that's super fun to me is Penn State and Auburn. I think that one, two teams that had underwhelming years, and it's going to be very much a litmus test. I think it's week 3. It's in Happy Valley. So you're going to have new regime for Auburn, and then you're going to have Penn State kind of coming off their worst year in recent history. Can they both bounce back? What's that going to look like? So definitely kind of a, test your manhood game.
I mean, that'll be College game day. I don't see any other games so far. It have been, the SEC and ACC released their schedules this week. No game so far that's going to top that. I wanted to circle back real quick to Georgia and Clemson, because here's what's going to happen. Whoever wins that game, that fan base will be talking about which playoff game are we about to go to, especially Clemson, because, are they going to face a formidable opponent in the ACC championship? Maybe in North Carolina. I think the gap's still, big there, though, bigger than you might think. But I mean, Georgia, after they play Clemson, you've got UAB, South Carolina, Vandy, Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky. And again, this is Auburn in year 1 of a new head coach and a new staff, right?
Right.
You're talking double-digit favorites over all of those teams.
Yeah.
Then you've got Florida, maybe a touchdown favorite over Florida, Missouri, Tennessee, Charleston Southern, Georgia Tech. You're talking double-digit favorites the rest of the way, except against Florida. And
you might be by the time that game comes around, if there's a
depending on how Florida is,
yeah, depending upon what they replace.
I mean, Clemson, same thing for them. Clemson, you got Georgia, and then after that they play South Carolina State, Georgia Tech, NC State, Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, Florida State, Louisville, UConn, Wake Forest, South Carolina with Shane Beamer. Pitt. That's right. We are a Pitt podcast. But anyway, enough of that game. There will be plenty of talk about that game. Daniel, a game that you might be aware of this. You might not. So I hope I'm telling you this for the first time. Do you know who Georgia Tech plays in week 2?
I don't.
Take a look at that degree behind you, brother.
Hooty hoo.
The Kennesaw State Owls. So you and I have been calling for this game to be played since Kennesaw State got a football team. You graduated from Kennesaw State. I attended Kennesaw State for a couple of years. So we've got some Owl love there. I don't know if they're going to beat Georgia Tech, but Kennesaw State still runs, version of the triple option. Their coach, Brian Bohannon, was on Georgia Tech staff. So he's a Paul Johnson apprentice. So that'll be fun for you and I. Maybe not for anyone else, but you've got a lot of good week 1 and 2 matchups. So even the ones we're looking at, Alabama, Miami, Pitt and Tennessee play in week 2, right? You've got Ole Miss and Louisville in week 1, Florida State and Notre Dame, not a conference game anymore this year. Arkansas plays Texas in week 2, which is, that'll be a fun game.
An old Southwest Conference game.
That's right. It is an old Southwest Conference game. And then Texas A&M goes to Colorado. So that's an old Big 12 game.
Yep. I wonder if you could ever get Texas A&M and Texas to just play, but that's not.
But both sides are going to keep blaming each other. So one winner I did want to call out, and Josh Pate, who we're actually going to have on the show in just a few days next week. So Josh Pate pointed this out on a podcast I listened to this week. Missouri. You might not look at the opponents and say Missouri's a winner here, but it's all about when they play teams on their schedule. For example, so they play Tennessee the week after Tennessee plays Florida. They play Texas A&M, but the week after Texas A&M plays Alabama. Georgia, the week after Georgia plays Florida. South Carolina, the week after South Carolina plays Florida. And then Arkansas, the week after they play Alabama. So, at several letdown spots, and not even letdown spots. It's several spots where you can go through a game and just get beat up physically because of the opponent that you played and the level of athletes you're having to go against. Stroll into that Missouri game, and Missouri's got 6 of those games where you're going to be playing most likely a beat up team. So I just think based on that, they are winners of the 2021 SEC schedule.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Alabama, now I know it's only 3 times, but they play 3 opponents who are coming off of a bye when they play them. So, similar, Georgia had that a couple of years ago where they actually had 5 opponents who had a bye week before them. So 3, it's still just 3. But hey, that's enough where you're probably going to get tired of, you playing the week before, and then all of a sudden you stroll in and, you're beaten up a little bit, and this other team's been game planning for you for a week and a half and they're well rested. So, it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. But Alabama, they're not a stranger to pressure. They're not a stranger to any of that. So if any team can handle it, the Crimson Tide do just fine.
You know how many teams Clemson plays that has a bye before they play Clemson?
I didn't see it.
Not one.
Really?
Oh, you don't think the ACC did that on purpose? You're talking about the conference that canceled the last game for Notre Dame and Clemson to give them a bye week before their little championship game.
Are you talking about the All Clemson Conference, the ACC?
I mean, this is what's funny. Even Syracuse, who Clemson gets a bye before they play Syracuse. Syracuse does not have a bye before they play Clemson. And it's on a Friday night after Syracuse plays on a Saturday.
Now, Jacob, are you a conspiracy theorist?
Oh, no. I just think it's funny. I don't think it changes the results of these games whatsoever. But I did think it's funny because typically a lot of teams, Alabama's a great example. A lot of teams will get bye weeks before they play Alabama because they want to, hey, that's the big dog. We want to get our bye week in before they play Alabama. You mentioned Georgia. And I went to look at Clemson to see, I wonder how many teams, that is for Clemson. It's 0. So I just think it's funny. But, excited for these schedules. I'm trying to tamper it a little bit because, we got excited for schedules last year. So if we can make it to June, I just, hope and pray we make some progress with COVID-19 so that we can get really excited about these schedules and pick all these games and not have to repick like we did last year.
Yeah, we really cut our teeth doing the picking because, my goodness, we picked every conference 4 or 5 times, it felt like. So right. We really got to know the Big Ten and the Pac-12 intimately by the time we actually, kicked off the season. So, it'd be great, and especially getting some non-conference games amongst these Power 5, Power 5 conferences. I mean, that's what everybody wants, and that's just such a great measuring stick. It just does so much for the sport. And you and I are all for it. So definitely excited. That's going to be awesome. There's so many good ones. So just, I'm ready for it.
Be sure to follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod on Instagram and Facebook. You can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes. And Daniel, what do they need to do on Apple Podcasts?
Man, y'all need to give us a 5-star review, please. We really appreciate it. If you could just do that, we'd love to answer any questions you have on there. If you tell us who your favorite team is, we'd love to highlight them, do a couple minute spot. This is your chance to hear what you want to hear. I promise you our knowledge goes way beyond what we just tell you in the, 30 to 40 minute show that we do each week. I promise you have a depth of knowledge. And if I don't know something, guess what? We're going to research it. Jacob loves numbers. He would love to look up whatever question you have. We would be happy to do so. So please leave us a 5-star review. That helps us. It also helps you because then you can leave that comment, question, whatever topic. We'll bring it up and we'll talk about it. We want to tailor this off season to you guys just as much as anything. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.